The room was almost dark, except for a single lamp that trembled like a dying star against the velvet of night. Paris lay quiet outside, streets glistening from a soft rain, the scent of iron and lilac floating through the open window. Inside, the air shimmered with silence and silk. Someone was waiting. A dress hung on the wall, nothing extraordinary at first glance. Pale ivory, hem kissed with lace. But if you looked long enough, it seemed to breathe. The folds caught the light in strange ways, as though they remembered hands that once shaped them. And then footsteps. Soft, deliberate. A figure entered the room. A woman draped in shadows, face hidden beneath a hat. She approached the dress, touched it lightly, and whispered, "Tonight you will be seen." That was 1903. The night the world of fashion changed forever. Back then, Fashion Week did not exist. There were no flashing cameras, no front rows filled with critics. The idea of a show, of walking to display clothes, was as alien as the moon's far side. But in that quiet Parisian studio, something ancient stirred beneath the hum of electric light. The woman's name was Marie Vernet Worth, wife and muse of Charles Frederick Worth. The man often called the father of haute couture. He designed gowns that turned queens into living myths. But Marie, she walked them. Slowly, gracefully, as his clients watched in silence. Her steps weren't just movements. They were translation, from fabric to feeling, from creation to experience. And that walk, that soft, deliberate glide through the salon of House Worth, was the first spark of what we now call the catwalk. The guests didn't know what to do. They'd never seen a woman walk for fashion's sake. They whispered, clutched their fans, leaned forward. There was something magnetic in her movement, not vanity, but power. The dress swayed, caught the lamplight, and for a moment, even the city outside seemed to hold its breath. No one clapped. But something had begun. They would talk about it for days. They would imitate it, and soon, the salons of Paris would fill with other women. Mannequins. They called them then, stepping slowly through rooms where whispers turned into applause. The catwalk had been born, quietly, as all revolutions are. But before we chase the flash of Parisian lamps, before we drown in perfume and silk, we must travel backward, to the beginning of movement itself. Because the story of the catwalk doesn't begin in Paris. It begins thousands of years earlier, when walking meant something sacred. Long before fashion had a name, people still walked for meaning. In temples, in palaces, in desert courtyards, the body was language. To walk was to declare. The ancients understood what modern fashion would one day rediscover. That movement can create awe. That grace can command. That beauty is not what you wear, but how you move through the world. In the golden light of ancient Egypt, dancers in white linen moved before the pharaoh. Their steps were slow, ritualistic, each one echoing eternity. The linen rippled with the air, shimmering with oil and sun. People watched in silence. They called it worship, but what it really was performance. In that rhythm, Under that light, you could almost hear it. The faintest whisper of a catwalk's future heartbeat. Across the sea, in the marble cities of Greece, women led sacred processions for Athena. Their robes caught the morning wind as they ascended the Acropolis, steps aligned in divine symmetry. Philosophers wrote about their movement. Charis, they called it, the harmony between soul and body. They didn't know it, but they had defined the essence of modeling centuries before the first culture dress. Rum followed, louder and prouder. Victorious generals paraded through the forum. Togas dyed in crushed crimson snail shells, wreaths glittering in their hair. It was fashion as conquest, the walk as victory. Every empire reinvented the walk, turned it into a mirror of power. Even in distant Kyoto, the geisha learned the art of suri, ashi, the sliding walk. The kimono's fabric would glide, never sway. The effect was hypnotic. Each motion connected to breath, each turn timed with grace. They didn't know it, but they were rehearsing for the quiet elegance that would one day dominate Paris. Time folded like silk. The Renaissance courts rediscovered spectacle. In Florence, nobles practiced their entrances. Steps timed to music, hands arranged to highlight embroidery. It wasn't yet fashion. It was status made visible. But the principle was the same. To be seen walking beautifully was to exist twice, once in reality and once in memory. By the 18th century, France had turned the walk into theatre. Versailles glittered with powdered wigs and sweeping skirts. Courtiers didn't simply enter a room. They arrived. They rehearsed for hours. Each turn, each bow, each lift of the chin. And when Marie Antoinette glided through the hall of mirrors, she wasn't just a queen. She was the embodiment of a nation's fantasy. Every gaze followed her. Every step rewrote the rules of elegance. So by the time Parisian designers like Worth emerged, the world was already ready to watch. It had been waiting for centuries. Worth gave it a stage. Marie gave it motion. Soon, the fashion show became a ritual. Wealthy women came to see and to be seen. The air thickened with perfume, with envy, with awe. Each new creation shimmered like a secret unveiled. But what drew the eye wasn't always the dress. It was the walk itself. The slow reveal, the turn, the poise. They began calling it la présentation de mode, the presentation of fashion. But inside that phrase hid a revolution. It meant that clothing no longer belonged only to the wearer. It belonged to the observer, to the one who watched, who imagined, who desired. Fashion had become performance. That night in Paris, as Marie Vernet's heels clicked softly on marble, she carried with her the weight of millennia. The dancers of Egypt, the maidens of Athens, the queens of Versailles. Every step she took stitched the past to the future. And as she turned for the final time, her eyes caught the reflection in the mirror. Not just of herself, but of every woman who would ever walk after her. The room exhaled. A pause, a whisper, a birth. The lamps of Paris fade and time folds again. The marble of the salon dissolves into sand. The sound of silk becomes the hush of wind across stone. Now we walk where the word fashion does not yet exist, though its spirit already stirs beneath the human heartbeat. In the dawn of civilization, people dressed the way the sky dresses at sunrise. In color, in pattern, in ceremony. What they wore was never only for warmth. It was for meaning. And when meaning is worn, the body must move carefully. Egypt. The walk of light. The Nile hums below a violet sky. Torches flicker along the columns of Karnak, their flames bending like dancers. A procession begins. Bare feet kiss the cool temple floor. Linen skirts ripple, gold collars catch the light. The dancers move forward, each step measured by a drum no louder than a pulse. They are telling a story without words, the birth of the world, the marriage of sun and earth, the promise of return. When one turns her body and the fabric follows like a second soul, the watchers inhale sharply. They do not yet call it beauty. They call it divinity. And somewhere inside that movement, between cloth and gaze, the idea of the catwalk glimmers for the first time. Greece. The harmony of motion, the centuries roll forward, and the air grows saltier. In Athens, marble bleeds sunlight. During the Panathenaic festival, young women chosen for their grace lead the sacred parade. Their robes are dyed from crushed shells, their hair bound with olive leaves. They do not hurry. Each step is deliberate, balanced, an offering of symmetry. The crowd watches, half silent, as if afraid to break the geometry. The poets later write that beauty walks when the soul and the body agree on rhythm. They have invented nothing new, and yet they have named everything the future will adore. Rome. Triumph and theatre. Trumpets replace the lyres. The stones of the Forum tremble beneath 1,000 feet. A general, glittering in crimson and gold, rides through the arch of victory. Behind him march soldiers, servants, silks, and slaves. The crowd roars. To walk here is to conquer. Every movement is a declaration. The Roman toga flares like a banner. The turning of the head is choreography. The parade is spectacle, half religion, half entertainment. Fashion will borrow this hunger for attention and never quite give it back. India. The bridal journey. Now the air grows warm again, thick with jasmine. In Jaipur, candles float in bowls of milk. A bride steps forward beneath an archway of marigolds. The jewels on her wrists chime softly. The embroidery on her sari drinks the firelight. Each motion is slow, rehearsed, alive with history. She walks not toward applause, but toward destiny. The guests rise as she passes, eyes shining not with desire, but reverence. Here beauty is ancestry stitched into fabric, each thread a lineage, each color a vow. And still, though she knows nothing of Paris or velvet runways, her walk carries that same unspoken rule. Move as though the world is watching. China and Japan. The art of stillness, across oceans, another kind of grace blooms. In the courts of China, silk becomes philosophy, light made touchable. The nobility move through gardens like drifting petals, sleeves trailing behind them in perfect arcs. The gesture itself is art. The path becomes a living scroll. And in Kyoto, centuries later, A geisha glides through paper doors. Her kimono swishes like whispered poetry. She keeps her feet hidden beneath layers of fabric, sliding rather than stepping. Nothing jerks, nothing rushes. Time itself seems to wait for her to finish a turn. The onlookers do not breathe. They have entered the spell of motion, so refined it almost disappears. This is elegance as meditation. The quiet twin of the catwalks, later fever. Europe. The mirror of courts, time sighs again. And now candlelight returns. The Renaissance spreads across Europe, scattering color and music. Tailors become artists. Fabric becomes fortune. In the palaces of Florence, ladies practice entrances as painters, adjust their canvases. They learn how to hold the head, how to let a train sweep behind, without tangling. A noblewoman's progress through a ballroom is studied as carefully as a sonnet. She is both participant and painting. By the time the dance reaches France, the art is perfected. Versailles is a theatre made of mirrors. When a duchess walks, 100 versions of her glide beside her reflection. Each step multiplies infinite, until motion itself feels royal. It is not yet a show, but it is rehearsal for one. The invisible thread, through all these ages, one thread runs unbroken. The belief that movement can reveal meaning. The ancients walked for gods, the nobles for honor, the courtiers for reputation. What they shared was the longing to be seen, and the discipline to move as if seeing mattered. That thread will tighten, shimmer, and twist until it becomes a narrow stage beneath spotlights. But even when the lights come, the ancient rhythm remains. The pulse of the drum in Egypt, the hush before a bride, the sliding step of Kyoto. The catwalk was never invented. It was remembered. And one night, centuries later, Paris would remember everything. The centuries breathe. The air cools. Candles become gaslight. Feathers become hats. And the whisper of silk turns into the murmur of cities. Somewhere in the heart of Europe, the hum of machines begins to stitch the modern world together. But amid all the smoke and steel, a quieter revolution grows, one not of engines, but of elegance. It begins not on a stage, but in a salon. The Parisian salons' birth of a whisper. Imagine Paris in the late 1800s. Streets trembling under the wheels of carriages. The smell of perfume and damp cobblestone mingling in the air. Behind heavy velvet curtains, rooms glow with laughter and champagne. Here, the first true designers, not mere tailors, but dreamers, are gathering women of influence to show them their creations. There is no stage yet, no runway. Just a small space cleared between chairs. A model steps forward, eyes lowered, gloved hands brushing against silk. She turns slowly, letting the fabric breathe. The women watching lean forward, captivated. They call these evenings mannequin parades. And though they don't yet know it, they've just invented the rhythm of the catwalk. The world won't remember their names. Most of the early models were seamstresses, friends, even wives of the designers. But their steps began the revolution that would dress the dreams of the next century. Charles Frederick Worth, the first to sign a dream. Among those salons walks a man whose name still echoes softly through time. Charles Frederick Worth. An Englishman in Paris, Worth believed that fashion should be more than clothing. It should be authorship. He was the first to place his label inside a dress, to turn a seam into a signature. But his genius wasn't just in the needle. It was in the presentation. In his gilded salon at Rue de la Paix, he asked living women to wear his gowns for his clients. A radical gesture. These were not still mannequins. They were performers narrating fabric with movement. Ladies gasped. Husbands took notes. Orders flooded in. Worth had created something sacred and seductive. A fusion of theatre, commerce, and art. The walk became a spell, and every step sold a dream. Lucille, the first true catwalk. A few decades later, in London, another visionary whispered a deeper magic into that walk. Her name was Lucille, born Lady Duff, Gordon. She did not just show dresses, she staged stories. Her mannequin parades featured soft lighting, music, and even themes. Her models didn't just walk, they acted. Each gown had a personality. The innocent, the siren, the duchess. Lucille gave them names. She taught them to pause, to glance, to turn their heads just so. Audiences swooned. Critics mocked. But the world couldn't look away. It was 1901, and for the first time, fashion had a narrative, and somewhere deep within the collective memory of humanity. The temple steps, the Roman triumphs, the bridal walks, everything connected. The catwalk, though modern, was ancient in spirit. Lucille's parades became famous across Europe. Her models, often aristocrats themselves, became early celebrities. Some newspapers called them goddesses of motion. The idea of fashion as a spectacle was no longer a secret. It was a profession. The hidden faces behind the curtain. Yet behind every shining model, shadows lingered. The seamstresses who stitched through the night. The assistants who powdered faces. The women who fainted under the weight of corsets and candlelight. They built the beauty no one named. Their steps never touched the catwalk, but their labor paved it. Fashion, even in its infancy, carried this quiet contradiction, the elegance above and the exhaustion beneath. And perhaps that duality gave the catwalk its strange allure, the shimmer of perfection that hides the struggle underneath. Paris, 1910, the walk becomes a show. By the turn of the century, Paris was the capital of dreams. Designers like Paul Poiret transformed fashion into theatre. Poiret banned corsets, invented the empire silhouette, and threw costume parties that lasted until dawn. His models, tall, ethereal, almost mythic, would glide through gardens lit by lanterns. People didn't just see dresses, they saw freedom. Each presentation grew bolder, more sensual. Silk replaced restraint, and movement replaced stiffness. The catwalk had begun to evolve, from polite salon demonstration to living art form. When Poiret's models walked, it was as if the world itself was learning how to breathe again. And beneath the applause, another sound rose, the whisper of destiny. Because soon the world would break apart, and the walk, fragile, beautiful, and brave, would have to learn how to survive war. The world trembles. The glow of chandeliers fades beneath the smoke of cannon fire. Paris, once the heartbeat of elegance, now beats with fear. Fashion, once the plaything of the elite, becomes a memory sewn inside empty salons. But even when empires collapse, beauty hides in the rubble, waiting. The silence after silk. The Great War swallows Europe. The models trade silk for uniforms, lace for ration cards. Seamstresses patch soldiers' coats instead of evening gowns. The walk becomes a march, slow, determined, endless. And yet in small corners of Paris, the sound of scissors still cuts through the silence. Women who once served tea now run sewing rooms. Designers' wives take over the business while their husbands are at the front. And as death thunders outside, inside, thread continues to move through fabric. It is not fashion as luxury now. It is fashion as defiance. Coco Chanel, the woman who walked against the wind. In a quiet apartment on Rue Cambon, a young woman lights a cigarette and stares at the empty streets below. Her name Gabrielle, Coco Chanel. While others mourn the loss of the old world, she begins to build a new one. Gone are the corsets, the feathers, the gilded cages. In their place, simplicity, comfort, movement. Her models walk not as dolls but as women, strong, unbent. They glide through her salon in jersey dresses and pearls, hands in pockets. A small rebellion wrapped in grace. Coco doesn't invent the catwalk, but she changes its soul. She turns fashion from decoration into language, one that says, "I am free." And when the war ends, her style becomes the anthem of survival. The world rediscovers walking, not for spectacle, but for self. Between wars, the runway awakens again. By the 1920s, Paris breathes again. Jazz trembles through the air. Automobiles shine beneath the moonlight. And in small ateliers, the walk returns. Sharper, bolder, faster. Designers like Jen Patou, Madeleine Vionnet, and Elsa Schiaparelli treat the runway as theatre once more. Models move to music. Photographers flash bulbs like lightning, and the crowd leans closer than ever before. Each show becomes a ritual of rebirth. The dresses float, the fabrics shimmer like champagne. There's laughter, lipstick, and the ghost of sorrow beneath every smile. But no one dares to stop moving, not after having survived the stillness of war. And slowly, the catwalk finds its rhythm again. The Second War, when beauty went underground, then darkness returns. 1939. The world breaks once more. Paris falls silent under occupation. Fashion houses close or hide. Many designers flee, others survive quietly, whispering fabric dreams behind blackout curtains. Yet, even under curfew, fashion persists. Quietly, secretly. In attics and basements, women repair old dresses, dye fabric from curtains, and walk their hallways like runways of hope. Magazines like Vogue Paris publish cautious optimism, sketches of gowns that may never be worn. And when the war finally ends, the world steps out blinking into the light, hungry again for color, for shape, for joy. And waiting for them is a man with a vision so radiant, it will change everything. Christian Dior The Walk Reborn, Rue Montaigne, Paris. The doors of Christian Dior's salon open. The city, still scarred and thin from war, holds its breath. Inside, women gather, some in borrowed heels, some with ration cards still in their handbags. They expect simple dresses, perhaps austere suits. Then, the curtains part. A model steps out. Her skirt blossoms like a flower after rain, full, lush, unapologetically feminine. Her waist is narrow, her gloves perfect, her walk serene. The room gasps. It is called the new look. After years of deprivation, Dior gives the world abundance again. His models glide like petals on wind, each step a rebirth. The crowd rises, weeping and applauding at once. The walk, the catwalk, has become more than display. It is resurrection. Fashion Week as we know it begins here, not officially, but in spirit. The salon shows of Dior, Balmain, and later Givenchy form a rhythm. A calendar of creation that will soon expand across the globe. The return of glamour through the 1950s, the catwalk evolves. It grows taller, longer, louder. Photographers swarm, film crews arrive, and the music begins to pulse with modernity. But beneath all the spectacle, that same old ritual remains one, human walking before many, carrying fabric, story, and dream. And though the faces change, the purpose does not. To walk is to tell the world, we survived. To move beautifully is to prove we still can. The war is over. The air tastes new again. Part perfume, part possibility. Paris hums like a woken beehive. The sound of heels on marble returns. Cameras click. Champagne bubbles. The catwalk is alive again. But this time, it will not stay hidden inside salons. It will spill into the world. The 1950s Paris leads the dance. Paris, reborn from ashes, becomes the capital of light once more. Designers like Christian Dior, Balenciaga, Pierre Balmain, and Hubert de Givenchy turn fashion into high art, sculpting silhouettes like poets shape verses. Their models move with precision. The walk is slower now, deliberate, almost regal. Every gesture counts. Every turn is punctuation. In these small salons, the catwalk finds its formal structure. A white platform raised above the audience, models in numbered looks, walking one after another, returning in sequence. Fashion becomes performance, timed to the heartbeat of music and flashbulbs. Guests whisper in a dozen languages. The front row fills with royalty, editors, film stars. Each collection feels like a secret shown once, then gone forever. But outside of Paris, another world is watching and waiting to catch the rhythm. New York, the first Fashion Week. It happens quietly at first. In 1943, while Europe burns in war, Eleanor Lambert, a visionary American publicist, has an idea. If Paris cannot show fashion, then America will. She organizes Press Week in New York, a series of shows for journalists, introducing American designers like Claire McCardell and Norman Norell. For the first time, an entire city moves in unison around fashion, schedules, invitations, reviews. This is the seed of Fashion Week. It is practical, structured, democratic, far from the candlelit intimacy of Parisian salons. But it works. Designers gain exposure. magazines fill with local names. And though Paris eventually reclaims the crown, New York never lets go of that idea. Fashion is not just art. It's organization, industry, and influence. The 1960s, youth walks the runway, the world tilts. The skirts rise. The music grows louder. London bursts onto the scene, swinging, laughing, breaking every rule. Designers like Mary Quant and Ossie Clark throw away the old scripts. The catwalk turns playful, kinetic, alive with color and movement. Models no longer glide. They bounce, twirl, smile. They are not porcelain. They are rebellion in heels. And one face captures the spirit of it all. Twiggy. When she walks, people don't just see clothes. They see a generation walking into its own reflection. Youth itself becomes the new luxury. Across the Atlantic, New York refines its format. Runway shows multiply, now open to department stores, buyers, and television cameras. Fashion becomes faster, louder, global. And somewhere, the walk shifts again. Less sacred, more electric. The catwalk becomes a mirror of time itself. The 1970s, when fashion learned to dance, the lights change. Disco hums through every city. The runway is now spectacle, mirrors, music, spotlights, swagger. In Paris, Yves Saint Laurent turns the catwalk into theater. He borrows from street culture, art and gender politics. His shows are performance. Fierce, sensual, intelligent. In New York, designers like Halston, Diane von Furstenberg, and Calvin Klein bring minimalism and modern power to the stage. Their models walk with freedom, hips swaying, heads high, unchained from old posture. And then something dazzling happens. Fashion Week spreads like wildfire. Milan rises with its sleek glamour. Versus, Armani, Missoni. London pulses with edge. Vivienne Westwood, Zandra Rhodes. New York refines efficiency, while Paris preserves elegance. By the end of the 1970s, 4 cities form the new calendar of beauty. The Big Four fashion weeks. The walk, once sacred in temples, once whispered in salons, now spans continents. The 1980s, the era of the superwalk, then comes excess. The decade of power suits, bold shoulders, metallic dreams. The catwalk becomes a global stage, televised, commercial, iconic. Designers like Thierry Mugler, Jean Paul Gaultier, and Gianni Versace turn fashion shows into spectacle. Spotlights flash like lightning. Music pounds. Smoke machines roar. And on those runways walk not models, but legends. Naomi Campbell, Cindy Crawford, Linda Evangelista, Claudia Schiffer, Christy Turlington. They don't just walk, they command. Each step is choreography, charisma, conquest. The audience doesn't watch fashion anymore. They witness power. The catwalk has become mythology. The 1990s, fashion meets pop culture. Now the walk becomes soundtracked by MTV. Designers court celebrities. Models become millionaires. Runway shows turn into cinematic events. Madonna, George Michael, David Bowie sit front row. Fashion is everywhere. On screens, in music videos, in magazines stacked at every corner. And though the glamour grows blinding, one truth remains beneath it all. The walk is still a story. Each model still carries fabric like a memory, still moves through centuries of motion. From temples to Paris, from war to starlight. The silent question beneath the glitter: who invented the catwalk? Was it Worth, who dared to make women walk in silk? Lucile, who gave them stories? Porrette, who freed them? Or was it the nameless woman who stepped softly in an Egyptian temple, millennia before anyone called it fashion, carrying light across stone? Perhaps the catwalk wasn't invented at all. Perhaps it was always there, waiting for humanity to remember how to walk beautifully. The century turns, and with it, the light. The world hums now not with orchestras or chandeliers, but with screens. The glow that once came from candles and flashbulbs now radiates from pixels. People still wait for the walk, even in a world of algorithms and holograms. Something ancient stirs when the lights dim and the first heel strikes the floor. The 2000s, the global spectacle. By the dawn of the new millennium, Fashion Week is no longer a series of shows. It's a planetary pulse. From Paris to New York, from Milan to Tokyo, the runways become temples of modern myth. Helicopters land celebrities on rooftops. Journalists chase after invitations like relics. Designers like Alexander McQueen turn the catwalk into story and shock, a theater of dreams and nightmares. He projects rainstorms, holograms, and revolving platforms in his 1999 show. Model Shalom Harlow stands in a white dress while robotic arms spray her with paint. Art and agony twined together. Audiences gasp. The catwalk has become pure emotion. Each designer now treats the runway as a message. Galliano paints history. McQueen questions beauty. Gaultier celebrates rebellion. Dyer redefines glamour. And through every theme, every silhouette, one thing endures: the walk. The silence before the first step. The heartbeat of heels echoing like drums in the dark. The 2010s, when the world started watching. The world is watching now. Not from front rows, but from phones. Live streams replace invitations. Instagram replaces magazines. Fashion Week expands beyond the cities. Dubai, Shanghai, Seoul, and Sao Paulo host their own spectacles. Every show becomes a global conversation. Every walk a shareable moment. Supermodels return, but differently. Now they are influencers, icons of identity and activism. Adwoa Abo, Bella Hadid, Winnie Harlow, Gigi Hadid. Each brings her story to the stage. Each walk more than fashion, more than fame. And when Rihanna launches her Savage X Fenty show, something shifts again. The runway, once exclusive, becomes inclusive. Every body, every color, every rhythm. Diversity steps where perfection once ruled. The catwalk, once narrow, widens into a stage large enough for everyone. The 2020s, the silent walk of screens. Then the world pauses. The streets empty. The music stops. A virus silences the cities. And Fashion Week, that ancient ritual of gathering, disappears overnight. For the first time in history, models do not walk before crowds. They walk for cameras. Living rooms replace front rows. Designers stream their visions across oceans of Wi-Fi. It is strange. It is lonely. But it is also rebirth. Balmain projects holograms. Prada turns its show into digital cinema, and Balenciaga invites the audience into a simulated video game. The runway existing nowhere and everywhere at once. Even without touch, the ritual survives. Even through a screen, the walk still carries magic. Because the catwalk was never about the floor beneath the feet. It was about the movement itself. The future beyond fabric. Beyond flesh now, whispers of the future float through the ateliers. Designers craft dresses from recycled dreams, plastic, metal, even light. AI conjures entire collections in seconds. Avatars walk in digital garments that shimmer only on screens. There are no front rows now, only endless feeds. No applause, only hearts, likes, streams. And yet, the longing remains. Because somewhere, deep inside the human story, we still crave that ancient rhythm. The heartbeat of movement, the ceremony of stepping forward, the hush before reveal. Whether in temples or metaverses, one truth remains constant. The walk is not about clothing. It's about courage. To walk is to declare existence. To move beautifully, even when the world trembles, is to say, we are still here. The eternal catwalk. So, perhaps the question was never who invented the catwalk. Perhaps it is, why do we still walk? Because walking is the oldest language of wonder. Because every stride, from the priestess in gold linen, to the geisha's glide, to the model in LED wings, is a conversation between body and dream. When the lights dim and the world holds its breath, what we witness isn't fashion. It's memory. It's hope in motion. And as the last model turns, the fabric whispering behind her like smoke, the room, or the screen, goes quiet. Then someone claps, softly at first. The ancient heartbeat begins again. Epilogue. The walk never ends. The catwalk is not a line. It's a loop. Every generation adds its own rhythm, its own light, its own rebellion. And when one show ends, another begins somewhere else, carried by a new dreamer, a new designer, a new footstep in time. So sleep now, gentle watcher. Let the fabric of history fold softly around you. For in your dreams tonight, you too may hear it, the distant, eternal sound of heels on marble, and the whisper that began it all. Step, turn, pause, breathe. The walk goes on, the lights fade. The audience drifts home, cameras sleep. But behind the curtain, the real world of fashion still whispers. For every model who glides through applause, a dozen unseen hands once steadied her gown. For every famous designer whose name glows in gold, countless others stitched quietly in the shadows. And this hidden world, is where the heartbeat of fashion truly lives. The first hands, the seamstresses of silence. Before the catwalk was marble, before it was glass, it was cloth on a table lit by a single candle. The first designers were not famous. They were seamstresses in attic rooms. Women with sore fingers and bent spines, whispering songs to the rhythm of their needles. In 19th century Paris, before the word couture became glamour, it was simply labor. Humble, endless, intimate. They worked through nights of rain, pinned fabric to wooden mannequins, told each other stories as they sewed dreams they would never wear. And when the dawn came, they carried those dresses carefully to the salons of men whose names history would remember. But never theirs. They had no signatures, no applause, no photographs. Only thread, thimbles, and the quiet pride of creation. Their reward was knowing the fabric would move, that beauty would walk, even if no one ever knew who made it possible. The catwalk was born from those hands. The model who had no name. History remembers Lucille, Dior, Saint Laurent, but not the young woman who walked for them the first time. She was 19, perhaps 20, a seamstress turned model, a daughter of a dressmaker from Lyon. Her name doesn't appear in records, only in fragments of letters. Mademoiselle F. wore the blue gown beautifully. One critic wrote in 1898, "No surname, no portrait, only movement." But the designers spoke of her often. How she understood the rhythm of fabric, how she could turn and make the air itself pause. She didn't walk for fame. She walked because she loved how the fabric breathed when it moved. After her, other girls followed, and so began the lineage of grace that the world would later call supermodels. She, the first to walk the dream, slipped quietly back into history, forgotten but never gone. For every step on every runway, a part of her still walks. The tailors in the shadows, in the golden salons of Paris. Men took credit for designs, but the tailoring was often done by invisible masters. Old Italian artisans, Jewish refugees, and French apprentices whose hands spoke languages their mouths never could. They cut patterns in silence. They measured dreams. Their tools were humble: chalk, scissors, patience. They called themselves les petites mains, the little hands. Even today, in the grand ateliers of Dar and Chanel, that name survives. These are not factory workers. They are artists of obsession. Each hem, each dart, each invisible stitch is an act of faith. Faith that the world still values beauty, enough to be made by hand. Some worked 40 years in the same room, sewing buttons onto gowns that would live only one night beneath chandeliers. When asked why they stayed, one seamstress once whispered, "Because in the moment the dress moves, I am there, even if no one sees me." And that is the secret heartbeat beneath every catwalk ever built. The muse who changed the room. Every era has its muse. That one figure who doesn't just wear fashion, but transforms it. In 1920s Paris, it was Josephine Baker. Her presence rewrote the rhythm of beauty. Bronze skin gleaming under the lights. Energy uncontained by corsets or convention. When she danced, she wasn't walking for anyone's approval. She was the walk itself. Laughter, freedom, rebellion. Designers watched in awe. Painters painted her. Women copied her short curls and daring skirts. In her movement, fashion discovered motion as liberation. But her story, too, was rarely credited as fashion history. She was called a performer, not a muse. Yet her spirit still lingers in every bold walk that defies rules. Sometimes the catwalk belongs not to the designer, but to the woman who refuses to walk quietly. The ghost dress, There is a rumor, whispered among old tailors, of a gown that was never shown. Paris, 1938. A young designer unknown crafted a dress of such fragile silk that it could not be worn twice. He poured his savings into the fabric, the pearls, the stitching. On the morning of the show, war was declared. The collection was cancelled. The designer vanished into the army. The dress was left behind in his studio, hanging like a memory caught mid-breath. Decades later, it was found, folded in yellow paper. The silk had faded, but the cut, the line, was perfection. They called it the ghost dress. It was never walked, never applauded, never photographed. And yet, when curators unfurled it, the air around it trembled, as if it still remembered the walk it never took. Fashion has many such ghosts. Every dress is a memory waiting to move. The women who walked in secret, not every walk was public. In the 1950s and 60s, in colonial countries far from Paris and Milan, young women began holding small, secret shows. In Cairo, Mumbai, Karachi, Buenos Aires, living rooms turned into runways. They modeled gowns they'd sewn from scraps. Sometimes curtains, sometimes old saris. They invited neighbors, played records, applauded each other shyly. They didn't call it fashion. They called it celebration. And though no magazines wrote about them, those evenings planted seeds. Many of their daughters would later become designers, stylists, and pioneers in their own cities, carrying the rhythm of those hidden nights into the global stage. The walk was always meant to belong to everyone. The forgotten designer, who became a legend. Paris, 1952. In the shadow of Dier's new look, a quiet genius worked in a narrow atelier on Rue du Bac. Her name was Madeleine Vionnet. Unlike the grand couturiers, she despised spectacle. She cut fabric on the bias, diagonal, so that it flowed like water. Her gowns didn't need corsets. They followed the body like breath. Vionnet called her mannequins my daughters. She treated sewing like sculpting, believing fabric had soul. But when war came again, she refused to compromise with occupiers. She closed her house and vanished. For decades, her name faded, until new designers rediscovered her patterns and realized she had quietly invented modern draping itself. Her legacy returned like a whisper that had been waiting in the folds of silk all along. Not every revolution is loud. Some are cut on the bias. The hands that never rest. Every major collection ends the same way. Silence before the applause. But the next morning, while critics write and models sleep, the true artisans return to their workrooms. They clean needles, replace thread, adjust mannequins for the next dream. They are invisible to cameras, yet eternal in craft. No show can exist without them. No walk can begin until they finish. When you watch a model glide across a runway, you are really watching hundreds of invisible gestures. Cuts, folds, pins, sighs, hopes, all woven together into movement. Their hands are tired but proud. Their reward is not fame, but continuity. To see something beautiful move, even for a moment. And when they close their eyes at night, they dream not of applause, but a fabric floating perfectly beneath the light. The eternal studio, there's a room. Somewhere in Paris, or perhaps only in imagination, where all of these figures still exist together. The seamstress humming softly, the first nameless model walking, Lucille arranging flowers by the mirror, Worth adjusting a hem, Vionette sketching quietly by candlelight. Outside, centuries pass, but inside the room stays the same: light, breath, motion. It is the eternal atelier, where the soul of fashion sleeps and wakes again, each season reborn through new hands, new dreams. And if you listen closely, you can hear it: the faint rustle of fabric, the sigh of pins, the distant echo of heels upon wood. That sound, that heartbeat, is the catwalk's true beginning. It was never owned by anyone. It was simply waiting for us to remember. Coda, the walk within. Perhaps the reason the catwalk continues century after century is not vanity at all. Perhaps it is ritual, our way of practicing grace in motion. Because every person at some point must walk before the world, into love, into grief, into age, into change, and in that moment, we all become models of our own becoming. We straighten our backs, take a breath, and step forward. Not for applause, but because the world, like a watching crowd, is waiting to see how we carry what we are made of. The catwalk, then, is not just a stage. It's a mirror, teaching us to move with courage, to wear our lives like art. And when the final curtain falls, and the lights fade, and the music sighs away, somewhere unseen, another story begins. A hand lifts a needle, a girl adjusts a dress. A step begins again, the walk never ends. Paris exhales softly. Morning drips down its windows like melted gold. The air carries the faint scent of roasted beans, wet stone, and rain. Trains whisper beneath the streets, carrying new faces toward old dreams. The city does not remember every century it has lived through, but the stones remember footsteps. The clip of heels, the hum of silk, the hush before a show begins. Fashion Week has returned again, though no one really calls it that anymore. Now it is simply the season of light. The grand halls are still there, but their walls have softened. Their mirrors carry not only reflection, but memory. Layers of faces, gestures, fabrics, lives. And outside, under the trembling dawn, a young girl clutches a sketchbook. She is not famous. Her shoes are worn, her scarf borrowed, but in her hands, pages bloom with shapes and folds that look like dreams. She walks past cafes, past mannequins standing still behind glass, past the river, where swans glide like forgotten gowns. She doesn't know it yet, but she is walking the same invisible path that the first model once traced. A line that runs not across a stage, but through time itself. The atelier of morning light, at the edge of the Marais. In a courtyard filled with ivy, stands a workshop, so small it looks like a secret. Its windows fog in winter, its floor creaks like an old piano. Inside, 3 people work. Not designers, not tailors, simply makers. They don't speak much. One hums an old lullaby as she irons a hem. Another sketches patterns in chalk, erasing and redrawing as if the lines themselves were shy. They have no brand. Their labels are blank. They work for the love of seeing something become real under their hands. On one wall hangs a photograph, a faded image of a woman walking in a gown that seems to float. No one remembers her name. Yet every time they finish a dress, they place it on the mannequin and wait. Sometimes, in the late hours, they swear they can hear soft footsteps crossing the room, as if the air itself were rehearsing the next walk, the return of the walk. The first night of the new season arrives quietly. No fireworks, no grand invitations, only a narrow hall lit by candles and curiosity. The audience is small: artists, poets, strangers, old seamstresses, people who once made clothes for others but now come simply to see. The music begins not with a drum, but with a heartbeat. Then, movement. One figure steps into the light, then another. They are not models. They are not professionals. They are simply people: a teacher, a gardener, a painter, an old man in a perfectly pressed suit. They walk slowly, gracefully, as if each step were an act of remembering. The fabrics shimmer in quiet ways: linen that sighs like breath, silk that carries stories in its folds. There are no spotlights, only moonlight through glass. No cameras, only eyes that understand. And, yet, it is the most beautiful show anyone can remember. Because for the first time in a long time, fashion feels human again. The city listens. After the show, the city doesn't sleep. It listens. In every cafe, people speak softly of what they saw. Not just clothes, but a kind of tenderness. The idea that beauty didn't have to shout. It could whisper and still be heard. Designers who once chased fame pause in their studios that night. They stare at half-finished sketches and for the first time wonder if they've been running too fast to feel the fabric breathe. A few begin to return to needle and thread, to cloth and chalk, to patience. One even writes in her notebook, "Perhaps the future of fashion is its memory." The man who wove the sky. There is an old weaver who lives on the outskirts of the city. His hands are crooked with age, his eyes pale from years of staring at patterns. He weaves not for sale, but for the joy of seeing color meet light. His tapestries hang in museums now, but he prefers the small ones he makes for himself. Pieces of sky, translated into thread. One morning, a young woman from the atelier visits him. She asks, "How do you choose your colors?" He smiles. "Colors choose me?" he says. "When I was young, I tried to control them. Now, I listen." She tilts her head. "Listen to the silence between hues," he says. "That's where beauty waits." She never forgets those words. Later, when she designs her next gown, she chooses not colors, but feelings. And somehow, the fabric glows like morning. The memory dress. In the heart of the season, one creation stands apart. A dress made entirely from forgotten pieces. Scraps of lace from old trunks, buttons from coats long lost, thread from a closed-down factory. It is assembled slowly, every stitch carrying a name, every hem a memory. When it is finally worn, The fabric moves like it remembers too much. Like every fiber still carries a whisper. Those who see it don't describe the color or the cut. They say only, "It felt like a story walking." When the show ends, the dress is placed in the atelier's window. It is never sold. It simply remains. A quiet shrine to everything that was once forgotten. At night, when the streets fall silent, the lamplight catches the folds, and for a moment, it looks as though the dress is breathing. Echoes of the old catwalk. The world outside Paris moves differently now. Runways exist everywhere, not as stages, but as gestures. Children in villages walk down dusty lanes, showing each other what they've made. Students repurpose old curtains into gowns and walk through campus gardens laughing. Mothers teach daughters to sew. Sons learn to mend. Friends share clothes not for trend, but for connection. The catwalk has returned to its truest form, a line of joy between people, and though the great shows still continue, with lights, music, spectacle, somewhere beneath it all, there's always one thread leading back to that quiet atelier, to the small room where three makers still work beneath a lamp. Evening returns to the city. The bridges glow like necklaces laid gently across the Seine. Reflections ripple. 1,000 fragments of color, gold dissolving into violet. On one bridge stands the young designer with her sketchbook. She watches the water move and wonders if every ripple is a version of the same dress. One the wind keeps remaking. She remembers the old weaver's words. Listen to the silence between hues. So she closes her eyes, and for a moment hears nothing but heartbeat and water. And in that stillness, she imagines the next collection, garments made not to impress, but to calm, clothes that sound like rain when they move, a catwalk that feels like breathing. The idea makes her smile. Perhaps fashion could become a lullaby again. The seamstress of the clock tower. Far across the city, in a tiny apartment beneath a clock tower, an elderly seamstress mends the cuff of a stranger's coat. She has no apprentices, no clients who know her name, only her cat and the steady ticking above her head. Each stitch she makes feels like keeping time itself alive. Sometimes, when the bells ring, she stops and looks at the skyline. She sees lights flickering in tall buildings, studios where young people dream of becoming known. She smiles faintly and whispers, "They will learn, as I did, that the world forgets names but remembers hands." When she finishes the coat, she hangs it by the window. The dawn will collect it soon. A courier, a customer, or perhaps the wind. It doesn't matter. She already knows where it truly belongs in motion. The walk that never ends. At the end of the season, another small show unfolds. This time, there are no guests at all. Just the makers, the models, the friends who helped sweep the floor. They stand in a circle of light and take turns walking, each one wearing something that tells their own story. A girl wears her grandmother's scarf, sewn into a dress. A boy wears a jacket patched from his father's shirts. An older woman wears a gown made of fabric she once dyed herself decades ago. As they walk, they laugh quietly, not the laughter of spectacle, but of recognition. For a few minutes, time softens. Past and present hold hands, and the walk continues, not toward fame, but toward understanding. When it ends, no one claps. They simply stand together, breathing, letting the silence become applause. Threads of tomorrow, weeks pass. Paris resumes its rhythm. The scent of coffee, the chatter of tourists, the soft rustle of ideas being born. The atelier keeps working, but something has changed. They no longer rush to finish. They pause between seams. They listen for the quiet sound of fabric thinking. One morning, a letter arrives with no return address. Inside it, a small piece of silk and a note written in slanted inky. Every thread you touch adds to the memory of all who came before. Do not hurry. The walk will wait. No signature. Just a single pressed petal between the folds. They pin the letter to the wall, beside the photograph of the nameless model. And somehow, the entire room feels lighter. The whispering mannequins night again. The streets empty. Inside the atelier, the mannequins stand in their usual silence. But sometimes, if you linger too long, you might think they move, not with steps, but with the slightest sigh of fabric. It's said that every mannequin remembers one person who once stood before it. Every pinprick on its surface marks a dream, once tested, adjusted, perfected. One mannequin, old splintered, patched with tape, was found in the attic of a demolished house. When they brought it into the atelier, they discovered faint initials carved at its base FL. No one knows what they mean. Perhaps fashion lives, perhaps first light, or perhaps the initial of that nameless model who walked the first walk long ago. The eternal mirror. There is a mirror leaning against the wall, cracked slightly at the edge, but still clear. Every person who works in the atelier glances at it before they leave, not to admire themselves, but to see the reflection of what remains behind them. In that glass, they swear they can glimpse silhouettes. A woman from another century adjusting her hat, a tailor bending over a hem, a dancer laughing, pearls catching candlelight. The mirror has become a bridge between worlds, reminding all who look into it that beauty never vanishes. It merely changes hands. The last walk of the season closes quietly. No announcements, no interviews. Only a final walk through an empty courtyard as snow begins to fall. The young designer from the bridge leads the line. Her gown is simple, grey like dawn, soft as fog. Behind her come the seamstress, the tailor, the friends, each holding a candle. Their footsteps make no sound on the white stones. Only the faint rustle of fabric, the same rhythm that has always guided the walk. When they reach the end of the courtyard, they stop, turn, and smile at one another. It is done, not ended, simply paused until the next dream begins. The candles flicker, the snow keeps falling, and the air hums with something that feels eternal. Epilogue. The dream continues. Some nights later, a tourist walks past that same courtyard. He notices a faint glow through the windows of the atelier. Inside, Mannequins stand dressed in unfinished gowns. No people, no sound, only light. He pauses, listens. For a heartbeat, he thinks he hears music. Then the wind shifts and the sound fades. He moves on, not knowing he has just witnessed the oldest story in the world. Creation quietly beginning again. Because fashion, like time, never truly sleeps. It rests, breathes, wakes, and walks once more. Every generation finds the thread, pulls it gently, and follows where it leads. Through cities, through centuries, until the walk becomes part of life itself. And so the dream continues. A whisper across fabric, a shimmer across memory, a step that outlives applause. The catwalk was never a stage. It was always a bridge between who we were and who we are still becoming.